Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has a moronic solution to the border crisis, and we'll share it with you. Plus, Lloyd Austin, MIA, AWOL, whatever you call it, it's not a laughing matter, so we won't be LOLing about it over here, not with our service members in harm's way. And a fond farewell to Mehdi Hassan over at MSNBC. Boy, we're going to miss that propagandist. It's a special Go Blue edition of Larry right now. Seriously, why should David Portnoy have all the fun, right? We can get Barstool over here. Go Blue. God, they better win that game. Hey, I'm Larry O'Connor. You can call me Larry. We are live across all the Town Hall Media platforms, whether it's our social media, YouTube, Facebook, wherever you're watching us, or on X. Have we gotten used to the X thing, or is it still X, formerly known as Twitter? We're X. We're all X-Men, aren't we? Or if you're watching us across all the Town Hall sites, including Hot Air, Red State, PJ Media, Twitchy, and of course our friends at Bearing Arms. Thank you, welcome, and happy Monday to you. You may think we have a border crisis. You may think that it's a national security crisis. You may think that it's a economic and also cultural crisis, as we're seeing not just in Texas and border states, but of course the latest border state of New York and Illinois, because migrants are going there illegally and draining the resources of those cities. You may think that the Biden administration refuses to secure the border, and therefore we've got a crisis that is absolutely impossible to solve. But you'd be thinking wrong, my friends. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, I believe she is the president of the Mensa chapter on Capitol Hill. She has come out with the perfect solution to this issue, and she shared it on, well, appropriately, Comedy Central. But sadly, I don't think she was making a joke.
From all parts of the political spectrum, one of the biggest issues that we have when it comes to immigration is the fact that we have an undocumented population. Mm-hmm. Now, you can fix that by trying to build a wall, or you can fix that by trying to document people and create a path to citizenship. Mm-hmm. And you'll have folks that might say, look at these systems, you know, that our shelter system has weight and things like that. But one of the reasons that our public systems experience weight is because people don't have a documented and reliable path to work and sustain themselves, just like all of our ancestors did, and our grandparents and great-grandparents from all parts.
All right, so couple things here. First of all, I got to watch the beginning part of this again for various reasons. I'm trying to discipline myself now and let these clips play through before I begin my commentary, because I just want to jump in 4 seconds in sometimes.
From all parts of the political spectrum, one of the biggest issues that we have when it comes to immigration is the fact that we have an undocumented population. Mm-hmm.
All right. So first of all, if your member of the House of Representatives is a chronic uptalker, you may need to do something about that, because I ain't going to last very long in this town if this continues. The uptalking used to just be for the Kardashians, or maybe some Hollywood starlets who are trying to build their Instagram following, but it wasn't members of the august institution founded by James Madison 230 years ago. What is this? We have a problem with our immigration. And now listen, I mean, you can make fun of my voice, and I'll, you'd have every right to. But I also, am not a member of Congress. That's hard to take her seriously with the uptalking. I've been trying to drill this into my kids since they were 12 years old. And guess what? They got better. Why can't she? But secondly, and more importantly, of course, on the substance of the issue.
Now, you can fix that by trying to build a wall, or you can fix that by trying to document people and create a path to citizenship.
So we have caravans of tens of thousands of people illegally plowing across our border. We don't know who they are. We don't know where they've come from. This president welcomes them with open arms and lets them flood into every major city of this country, draining the public resources, filling our schools, making it impossible for any of the major cities to function because they have to accommodate legally all of these people who are in this country illegally. And the euphemism for illegal immigration has now become undocumented. And her solution What are we going to do with all these people? Well, the problem is they're undocumented. So let's just give them documents. By the way, if they really are undocumented, how exactly are they getting on airplanes and flying all over the country? Because last time I tried to get on a plane and get through TSA without a driver's license, I was wrestled to the ground, strip searched, and they like hosed me down like it was the opening scene of Shawshank Redemption. It was uncomfortable. I only did it 3 more times. I almost got a date. But seriously, how are they flying around without documentation? They're literally undocumented. Her solution, of course, is document them. And what does that mean? That means amnesty. That's what that means. By the way, this is why they come up with the euphemisms. You know, you're not allowed to call them illegal immigrants because you're being unfeeling and uncaring. No human being is illegal. They're merely undocumented workers. Well, first of all, if they're undocumented, they shouldn't be working here. If they're working without documentation, that means they're breaking the law, which is illegal. Oh, there I go again, dehumanizing people. I'm not a murderer. I'm just an undocumented homicidal maniac. That makes it better. So we had to give them documentation, which means amnesty. It means anyone who comes here illegally, if Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was in charge, would suddenly be made legal. Just like that. Why not? Right? And who couldn't agree with that? I mean, that's the way socialists think, isn't it? Well, maybe not. Here's fellow socialist and Bernie Sanders dude, John Fetterman.
And allies admit
there's a crisis at the border. And I don't know how anybody could pretend that there isn't.
Well, his pal Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is pretending it isn't. In fact, he also spoke directly about this whole idea of legalization and amnesty.
It's almost 270,000 encounters, and that's a lot. It's not xenophobic to have a conversation about border security.
Oh boy, is he in trouble. Of course it's xenophobic to have a conversation about border security. Have you ever been paying attention, pal? But of course, border security isn't the real issue here. The issue is that they're just undocumented. And if we just give them legal amnesty and allow them to work here, then everything will be fine. But understand how this game is played right now. People come to this country illegally. Biden is not protecting the border. He is allowing them either through direct entry into one of our entry points at the border where they interact directly with the Border Patrol, or whether they're coming through a hole that's been welded out of the wall that was installed that hasn't been fixed, of course, or whether they're swimming across the Rio Grande. The second they set foot terra firma right here in the United States of America, they claim asylum. They illegally claim asylum. They pretend as though the asylum is for religious persecution or political persecution, but they're saying specifically that they're coming here to get a job, to make money and send it back to the country of origin, which may be a altruistic ideal for them. I mean, I'm sure that they are coming from an impoverished nation, and Lord knows I'd want to do well for my family. But when you come here and claim asylum for those purposes, you are lying. We have no asylum provisions for somebody who's just coming here to better themselves economically. That said, if you claim asylum, you immediately get a little golden ticket that says, come on back for your hearing. And in the meantime, you can stay here while your hearing is pending. Oh, and how long is the pending process? When will that hearing be? Oh, come on back around 2031. Yeah, it's averaging about 7 or 8 years right now. And even if you do show up for your hearing and the judge says, no, your asylum request is denied, you know what's going to happen. People are going to say, but I've been here and I've set up my life and my children have friends in school. And how can you be so mean and unfeeling? You should just give me amnesty and let me stay here. How do I know that's going to happen? Because that's what's been happening for the last 30 years. And remember, it all begins with people crossing this border illegally and asking for asylum. Let's get back to another Democrat, this one, the mayor of Boston. How exactly does that asylum thing work?
Every person, every human being has the legal right to come to the United States and seek asylum or shelter. And those policies have been in place for a long time. But when the review of that individual's particular situation and the then decision to allow the pathway to stay and or work authorization that comes along with that, when that process is so drawn out, people are stuck. They are.
People are stuck. They're stuck working here. But go back to the very first thing she said.
Every person, every human being has the legal right to come to the United States. And
Every living human being on the planet has the right to come here and ask for asylum. How many people we got on the planet right now? 5 billion? 6 billion? And the way the Democrat Party wants this to work is that every single one of those billions can come here, claim asylum, wait for their hearing, and in the meantime, stay. Live here, work here, do whatever you want. And if Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has her way, if they're undocumented, the way to solve that problem once they're here is to just document them. Why not? So literally every single person on the planet, if you follow through on their plan, will be a legal American citizen. That's their own words. That's the strategy. That's their plan. Can we just get back to the good old days when the entire planet was going to be American because we were colonial or imperialistic and we just conquered them? At the very least, can we get who's for imperialism? That's not a bad solution to this. And then that way, we take over their country. They become citizens, but at least they stay in the country. Only in the modern day Democratic Party does this make any kind of logical sense, and can they get away with this kind of rhetoric? And if you dare to say what I'm saying right now, well, yes, you're xenophobic and you're racist and you're protectionist and you're mean and you're unfeeling and you probably tweet mean things too, so you're probably an insurrectionist. But this is where we are. And again, I just want to be clear, this is the person right here who is one of the shining lights of their party, whose every single utterance could be carved in a gold tablet and raised up on high at Valhalla as something that has been directly delivered to her from God. And this is considered intellectual superiority right now on the political left in America.
From all parts of the political spectrum, one of the biggest issues that we have when it comes to immigration is the fact that we have an undocumented population. Mm-hmm. Now, you can fix that by trying to build a wall, or you can fix that by trying to document people and create a path to citizenship.
You know, in the inner cities right now, we have a major shoplifting problem in convenience stores and drugstores and bodegas. And you can either put security in those stores, protect the private property of those store owners, and arrest and prosecute the thieves, or hear me out, just give everything away for free. That's the argument she just made. Although I guess we shouldn't be surprised. What was the major solution to the drug problem in America? Wow, we got to legalize drugs, of course. Why doesn't anyone solve the speeding problem on our highways with this kind of logic? That's what I'm waiting for. People are going way too fast on the interstate. They're not keeping it under 70. So we better change the speed limit to 90. I mean, that I'd be on board with. Wouldn't you? Okay, one other thing on AOC and we'll move on, because my other favorite part of this is the smug self-satisfaction when the idiots in the audience applaud this brilliance from her. Again, she just finished saying that we have a problem with too many undocumented people in the country, and the best solution is to just document them. And watch the reaction
to citizenship.
The look back at the audience and the serious but understandable acknowledgement that I am in fact that brilliant. It's
and
God, I cannot. Is she old enough to run for president yet? How is she not run for president yet? You realize when she's old enough, which I feel like this is like that really weird thing that you like wait for somebody to reach a certain age and then everyone has a big celebration. Like when I was old enough to drink, right? It was like, you're 21, you just do something stupid. When she turns, what is the age? 35 now to run for president, right? When she turns 35 years old, is she 35 yet? You better look into this. She has got to be a presidential candidate. Like,
She's 34.
every next year. Next year, she's old enough to run for president. Oh, we just missed it in 20. I get right now, 2028, AOC 2028, and basically every 4 years for the rest of our ever living lives, this woman is going to be a perpetual candidate. I don't say I want it, but I kind of do. All right, this weekend, if you didn't notice, it was the anniversary of the events of January 6th. A date that will live in infamy. It was, of course, the most horrific day in all of American history. And over on MSNBC, they treated it pretty much exactly how you would expect. Jonathan Capehart had one of the Capitol Police officers on his show to sell a book. Literally, that's what he's doing now. He's selling a book about what happened to him for, 2.5 hours on January 6, 2021. And, well, here's Jonathan Capehart, a very, very serious journalist for the Peacock Network.
For known, I'm going to try to get through this. Thank you for what you did 3 years ago today. Please tell me your thoughts on this third anniversary.
Jonathan, I don't care how much you act up. He is not going to date you, okay? You might be his type. I'm not sure. But did you notice the prop Kleenex in his hand? He came to the set prepared. I promised myself I wasn't going to cry.
For known, I'm going to try to get through this. Thank you for what you did 3 years ago today. Please tell me your thoughts on this third anniversary.
We are still in the midst of the same fight that began on January 6th, 2021.
For known,
I was watching MSNBC when they did their recollections of the events of September 11th, 2001 this year. It's been 22 years since those events, right? And they didn't have this kind of raw emotion and this kind of drama. And the whole idea, we're still in the midst of all of this. Over in MSNBC world, the events of September 11th is ancient history. It was a one-off, and that sort of thing will never happen again. And then what? Literally a month later, radical Islamic terrorists slaughtered innocent Americans and Israelis just outside the Gaza border. That's an existential threat that people are still living with on a daily basis in this world and will continue to live with that threat. But not at MSNBC. No, at MSNBC, the real threat that keeps people up at night and brings very serious journalists like Jonathan Capehart literally to tears on the air is January 6th.
For known, I'm going to try to get through this. Thank you for what you did 3 years ago today.
Fanone, the Capitol Police officer who's selling a book, he should be commended for actually keeping a straight face through that. And you know that when he was done, the producers and the cameramen, well, maybe not the cameramen because those guys are real dudes. But the people at MSNBC, the producers and the writers and the marketing people, they were like, Jonathan, that was one of the bravest performances I have ever seen. I am so proud to be associated with this program. Thank you. Yeah. He makes Mika Brzezinski look manly. Seriously. Pull it together, Jonathan. Meanwhile, that's not even the most embarrassing thing for MSNBC this weekend. Mehdi Hassan is a propagandist, and he's had a show there at MSNBC, but recently it was canceled. And unbeknownst to his bosses, I believe, he made this stunning announcement on the occasion of his final show.
It's been an absolute blast doing this live show on MSNBC for the past 3 years with an amazing team of producers behind me and with all of you watching at home. It's been a privilege. It's been a pleasure. But as we begin 2024 with an election coming, a war still ongoing, and too many Trump trials, honestly, to even keep track of, and with this show going away, I've decided that it's time for me to look for a new challenge. Tonight is not just my final episode of the Mehdi Hasan Show. It's my last day with MSNBC. Yes, I've decided to leave. To be clear, I am so proud, so proud of what we've achieved on this show, on this network. And I can't thank you all enough for tuning in and for your support and for your feedback. But as I say,
have you noticed these British guys they all sound alike, right? Am I the only one? By the way, it's an American news network. Didn't we learn this lesson with Piers Morgan? Like you bring somebody over here with a foreign accent and then you begin lecturing us about our politics. It's like, I don't need that. I think Seb Gorka is the only one I'll tolerate. Pretty sure. But other than that, it's like, and he doesn't lecture me about my politics. So Mehdi Hasan has basically said to the powers that be at MSNBC, if you don't give me my own show, I'm out of here, which is a pretty good power move. One wonders who will hire him next. He has worked for Al Jazeera already, but that would be a bit of a step down, I would think. I mean, he'd fit in well with Christiane Amanpour and the team over at CNN because he hates America just the right amount. Although he doesn't hate America so much that he didn't want his citizenship. Oh, that's right. He got what he wanted from the NBC Comcast Universal Universe because he got a job here, he moved here, and then just in time for the 2020 presidential election, he became a naturalized citizen. So now we're stuck with him. I guess we're going to have to pay his unemployment insurance too. Yeah, that's right. He's on the welfare doles. But let's just take a walk down memory lane and remind you who exactly Mehdi Hasan is and what his track record has been. Now, this was an interview with the ambassador from Israel a couple of weeks after the events of October 7th. And Mehdi Hasan was quoting and delivering the death toll statistics that had been publicized by the Hamas terrorists, the propagandists. He was repeating them as if they were qualified facts. And the ambassador called him out on it. Here's how it went.
I'll give you an example, Mehdi.
No,
Originally, we estimated.
No,
I'm answering your question. Allow me to answer your question. I'm answering your question directly, if you'll allow me. We originally said in the atrocious Hamas attack on our people on October 7th, we had the number at 1,400 casualties. And now we've revised that down to 1,200 because we understood that we had overestimated. We made a mistake. There were actually bodies that were so badly burnt, we thought they were ours. In the end, apparently, they were Hamas terrorists.
I just give it a little bit of context, by the way. Mehdi Hasan had said, well, you say Hamas is not giving accurate numbers, but you had to change your death toll numbers from the October 7th attacks. I mean, as if this is the thing about this guy. He's like, oh, sure, Hamas might be propagandists, but so is the government of Israel. The equivocation, the equivalence here, the false equivalence between a democratically elected government and an authoritarian terrorist regime that murders innocent people. And this guy, the ambassador, said, all right, let me answer that. You're right. We overestimated the death toll because the bodies had been burned, dismembered, and mutilated. So what we thought was multiple bodies, sadly, horrifically ended up being just one corpse. You feel better now, Mehdi, for carrying the water for the terrorists? And actually, the answer is yes, he does, because it continues.
When we make a mistake, we admit it.
Short on time.
Why does that give you permission? Why does that give you permission to accept Hamas's numbers? I don't understand.
I didn't ask about Hamas's numbers. I said to you that
Yeah, I didn't ask about Hamas's numbers because I'm not interested in that. This is who Mehdi Hasan is. This went on and on and on, in fact. But there's more. Mehdi Hasan also joined Rashida Tlaib, Congresswoman, Democrat from Michigan, in pushing the propaganda that Israel had sent a rocket to a hospital in Gaza. Of course, we know now and continue to know that that was a lie. It was a fraud. It was a made-up story. The Congresswoman still has her post up on X.com saying Israel has just killed innocent children and women at a hospital. And Mehdi Hassan also, as you can see, given how confident they are about who's to blame for the hospital deaths, Israeli authorities should allow foreign journalists and international war crimes investigators into Gaza to see for themselves. See, he doesn't believe. He doesn't believe. He wants to go and see for himself. People kept showing him pictures of where the rocket came from and showing them video of the trajectory of the rocket that came from Gaza and then went right into the Gaza territories where the hospital was. But it's not good enough for him. No. From Mehdi Hassan's perspective, Israel is to be held up for scrutiny and suspicion because they're the real murdering liars out there, not the Hamas terrorists at Gaza. That's who he is.
Back in...
Oh, sorry. I thought I had one more clip of Mehdi Hassan. We'll get to you in a minute, Speaker Mike Johnson. So we listen, we're going to be really sorry to see Mehdi Hassan go. Not only is he not going to have an MSNBC platform to trumpet propaganda from the terrorists, to push lies like the Hamas, the Gaza hospital story, but also he won't be able to call non-Muslims animals. He won't be able to compare people who don't believe in Islam to mental illness. Those are things that he said back before he was hired by MSNBC, as reported by the Washington Free Beacon. Now, he did apologize for those remarks in 2019, and NBC said, oh, absolutely, no harm, no foul. We're also going to miss him supporting Ilhan Omar, the most anti-Semitic member of the House of Representatives. Every time she said something that was anti-Jew and anti-Israel, oh, Mehdi Hassan was Johnny on the spot to run out there and defend her at any cost. So it's going to be rough. I mean, listen, there's plenty of other people over at MSNBC to pick up the slack. Don't worry. And we do wonder where he's going to show up next. Like I said, it'll probably be CNN or now that he's a citizen, I'm thinking Congress might be calling. Right? And then he can defend Ilhan Omar as one of his trusted colleagues. Now let's get to Speaker Mike Johnson, who appeared on Face the Nation on CBS this weekend. Talk about the border, but then, of course, all CBS News wanted to talk about was the anniversary of January 6th. Have I mentioned recently that that is a date that will live in infamy? But Mike Johnson did a pretty good job parrying the attacks, as he often does.
Back in 2021, you were the lawmaker who circulated the legal brief known as the Texas amicus brief, challenging the 2020 election outcome in a number of states.
By the way, you notice the use of the language here. You circulated an amicus brief known as the Texas. What do you mean circulated? He distributed. He helped write it as a lawmaker, and he distributed it and put it. Circulated. It makes it sound like you're dealing with Nazi propaganda or you're passing things under the table surreptitiously on the dark web. It's like they choose these words very carefully, these journalists.
Which by CBS editorial standards makes you an election denier.
That's nonsense.
Well, can I get you on the record on that?
I've always been consistent on the record. Did you read the brief? Did you get a chance to read what we filed with the Supreme Court?
Well, I have read extensively some criticisms of that. But
This is why we love Speaker Mike Johnson over here, is that he asked the perfect question. So she sets it up. You circulated this legal brief questioning the validity of the 2020 election. That makes you an election denier based on our journalistic standards. And Mike Johnson immediately challenges those journalistic standards with a simple question. Oh, you're questioning the legal brief that I helped write and I distributed and the case that I made legally? Did you read it? Well, no, but I read criticism of it. Is that not perfect? But I mean, we're going to get back. It's a great exchange and a great moment for Speaker Johnson. And by the way, one thing I like about him is that he delivers this stuff with a very good smile on his face. He actually is, it appears, a happy warrior. But quickly, I want to take a pause on this CBS News journalistic standards moment.
2020 election outcome in a number of states, which by CBS editorial standards makes you an election denier.
By CBS editorial standards. Now, first of all, the real breaking news, and we probably should have led with this and retitled this video today, breaking, CBS News has editorial standards. Who knew? That's a giant leap forward, seriously. But our friend Spencer Brown, managing editor over at Town Hall, reminds us all what the CBS News editorial standards are. They actually made a big deal out of it. Let's blow this up real fast so we can get a good look at it. CBS News will now call somebody an election denier if you fit one or more of the following. Number one, question the legitimacy of Biden's election, said the 2020 election was stolen, repeated disproven claims of fraud, signed on to the Texas lawsuit to overturn the 2020 election, objected to 2020 electoral college count on January 6th, or supported 2020 something, probably Trump. If you supported Trump in 2020, but sadly, his arm is covering it. As Spencer Brown points out very helpfully, that CBS News's criteria now and their election standards will call anyone an election denier if they fit those criteria. It only applies to the 2020 election and Joe Biden's election win. It avoids every single Democrat who questioned anything regarding the 2000 Bush-Gore election, the 2004 Bush-Kerry election, and there were a ton of election deniers there, and then God knows the 2016 Trump-Hillary election. You can question those elections all you want in the most brazen and unbelievable over-the-top way, and CBS News will never refer to you as an election denier. But if you are the Speaker of the House of Representatives with a history and track record of writing legitimate legal briefs and amicus briefs to the court, and you put forth a detailed legal argument as to why basic election protocols that have been followed in every election up until 2020 was violated without due process, if you make that claim, you will be an election denier. But Hillary is still free and clear. So let's watch how this goes now as Mike Johnson deals with this outrageous slander.
That's nonsense.
Can I get you on the record on that?
I've always been consistent on the record. Did you read the brief? Did you get a chance to read what we filed with the Supreme Court?
Well, I have read extensively some criticisms of that.
You read commentary about the brief, but not what we submitted to the court.
But you recognize that President Biden won the 2020 election. Can you just put that aside?
President Biden was certified as the winner of the election. He took the oath of office. He's been the president for 3 years. The argument that we presented to the court, which is our only avenue to do so, was that the Constitution was clearly violated in the 2020 election. It's Article 2, Section 1, and anyone can Google it and read it for themselves. The system by which you choose electors to elect the president of the United States must be done by the individual states, and the system must be ratified by the state legislatures. That is language, plain language out of the Constitution.
Have issues with the validity of the 2020 election.
The Constitution was violated in the run-up to the 2020 election. Not always in bad faith, but in the aftermath of COVID, many states changed their election laws in ways that violated that plain language. That's just a fact.
It is. Thank you to our friends at MRC there for grabbing that clip, and 100% correct. Everything that Mike Johnson said and the way he said it, and it just went completely over the head of the journalist there at CBS News. Jacqueline says that she used to work for a CBS company, and the CEO and his goofy staff always dished on Republicans. That company hates conservatives. I should have filed a lawsuit. You should have, Jacqueline. You still could. We'll put you in touch with a lawyer if you want. Maybe Speaker Johnson will take it up. Yeah, of course. That's the climate over at a media. And this is my biggest beef, by the way, because I've worked in liberal media institutions in the past. And my biggest beef with groups like this is that, as you know, an interview with the Speaker of the House doesn't just happen overnight. And she sat down with writers and producers, probably even somebody from the network or an executive, and they went through the questions and they said, here's what we should ask, and do you want to do this, and you want to do this? And I guarantee you there was no one in the room like Jacqueline. There was no one in the room said, hey, you know, Republicans think this way. and they believe this. And if you approach it in this way, that's going to be really offensive to a lot of our viewers, and you're going to lose credibility. And oh, by the way, before we challenge Mike Johnson on the details of a legal brief that he put together, maybe we should read it. Or maybe if we're going to challenge something specific, we should actually pull it out and have him answer directly to it, instead of just say, well, if you don't accept what we've decided you have to accept on the 2020 election, we're going to call you a name, which sounds a whole like, a Nazi. They use the word denier on purpose, right? Holocaust denier, right? You see the connection there. It's the reason why they use the word insurrection, right? They pick their language very carefully. So if you don't agree with what we say you're supposed to agree with, we're going to call you a denier, suggest that you're against our country and against our Constitution, and we're going to make you have to defend that horrific belief that you have. But we're never going to actually pull out any details, any facts, or anything for you to answer to. And well, good for Mike Johnson for actually putting her back on her heels and saying, well, did you actually read it? Because here's the case we made. And that's probably the first time the CBS viewers have heard any kind of case made, let alone the people who actually work at CBS News. But of course, January 6th was top of mind for people in the media and Democrats. Same thing. And certainly for Joe Biden. We discussed on Friday how he was going to go grandstand at Valley Forge, Pennsylvania, and give a political speech. He was using Valley Forge as a backdrop. He was using the image of George Washington and soldiers of the Continental Army fighting in our American Revolution as political props, as a framework for him painting the upcoming election against Donald Trump and Republicans in very simple terms. If you are my political opponent and you oppose me, that means you're not just my adversary politically, but you are an enemy, not of me, not of my party, but you're an enemy of the Constitution of the United States of America and the very democratic process that we use to elect our leaders. That's what the speech did. That's what he said. And it wasn't enough to perpetuate that big lie. He also started this big lie.
Over 140 police officers were injured. Jill and I attended the funeral of police officers who died as a result of the events of that day. Because of Donald Trump's lies, they died because these lies brought a mob to Washington.
All right. So first of all, I am really thrilled that Joe Biden and his party are suddenly concerned about injuries that befall police officers, because I'm old enough to remember the events of the summer of 2020 and the George Floyd Black Lives Matter Antifa riots that were fiery but mostly peaceful. And there were a whole lot of cops that suffered injuries then. And last I checked, that guy's vice president choice, Kamala Harris, was actually setting up a bail fund to get those violent terrorist rioters out of jail, along with other accused felons, so that they could walk the streets and wreak havoc even further. I'm glad that they finally care about police officers and their safety. But this lie that he attended funerals of cops who died as a result of January 6th, name one. I mean, literally name one. Because no cop died as a result of January 6th. It's just a lie. And how he gets away with it, well, we know how he gets away with it. Because he has the media. The media is his. And anytime they would call him out on a lie, well, that would make them an insurrectionist as well. But if you remember, I told you on Friday that as he was using George Washington and the Continental Army as his political prop, he'll turn and pivot tomorrow and join the mob in tearing down George Washington's statue. See, they used George Washington and the founders and the Continental Army and the Revolution when it serves their purpose to call you an enemy of this country. But then they'll join the mob tearing down their statues because they're just a bunch of white colonialists, right? Slave owners, that's all they are, is slave owners, except when they need them to make a political point. And boy, oh boy, did I get that right. Because within 48 hours of that lamentable, shameful, and shameless speech at Valley Forge in Pennsylvania, well, the Biden administration has now announced that a statue of William Penn, the founder of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, a statue of William Penn will be torn down from a federal park in Philadelphia. And as our friend David Marcus, the political columnist and commentator from various news outlets, pointed out, and he's a son of Philadelphia, there, the city of brotherly love, David Marcus said, this isn't some woke, radical, left-wing city council deciding to take a knee to the mob and take down a statue of a slave owner. This is the federal government. This is the Biden administration. This is Joe Biden, the boy from Scranton, Pennsylvania. This is Joe Biden's federal government removing a statue of William Penn single-handedly because they want the park where William Penn's statue is right now to be more inclusive. More inclusive. So instead of the white male colonialist Christian who founded Pennsylvania, they're going to put up the African-American / Latinx lesbian disabled founder of Pennsylvania. Oh, I bet you didn't know about her. I mean, she, or whatever pronoun they use. No, but it's true. You know, their name was wiped from the history books, that African-American, Latinx, lesbian, disabled founder of Pennsylvania. Well, we need to be more inclusive, man. So there's Joe Biden tearing down William Penn. But if he needs to use William Penn to make his political point, rest assured he certainly will, provided his political point is to shame Trump, shame you for supporting Trump, and most importantly, to appeal to suburban white moms who live just outside of Philadelphia, who, while drinking Chardonnay and playing bunco with her pals, like to twist their hands and say, oh, it's terrible what we're doing to those people. Let's tear down a statue. That'll make it better. And don't you hate his mean tweets? That's who he's appealing to. And somehow, strangely, bizarrely, it works. Remember when Joe Biden became president and we were told that the grown-ups were now in charge, that the norms are being restored, that finally we will be respected around the world? Well, here's your Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin. That's not doctored, is it? That is literally... That was Lloyd Austin, the Secretary of Defense, visiting the Philippines. And clearly, this was what, 3 years ago, I think, or 2 years ago. Clearly, on that visit, he came down with something, because now the next thing you know, he's in intensive care at Walter Reed. That's not true. It had nothing to do with any kind of virus that he may or may not have picked up in the Philippines. No, Lloyd Austin checked himself in for a voluntary surgery, a voluntary surgical procedure, which, I mean, who knows what it is? He hasn't told anybody. Gender reassignment surgery is one of the possibilities. A Brazilian butt lift is also another one of the... Listen, if he doesn't tell us what it is, we're just going to have to guess. So it could very well be gender reassignment surgery, although since this is the Lloyd Austin Pentagon under the command of our Commander-in-Chief, Joe Biden, the big question is not whether he got gender reassignment surgery. The question is, which of the 74 approved genders did he reassign to?
Maybe he got an abortion.
He could have very easily terminated a pregnancy, and we would have paid for it, because that's the priority of Lloyd Austin's Pentagon. Well, the big breaking news today is just about an hour ago, John Kirby had a gaggle on Air Force One. He is the spokesperson for the National Security Council, and he reaffirmed Joe Biden's support for his Secretary of Defense.
There are some calls for him to be fired. Is that something that the president is wanting or considering doing?
President's number one focus is on his health and recovery, and he looks forward to having him back at the Pentagon as soon as possible. The president respects the fact that Secretary Austin took ownership for the lack of transparency. He also respects the amazing job he's done as defense secretary, and how he's handled multiple crises over the last almost 3 years now, and very much values his advice, candor, leadership, and again, looks forward to having him back at the Pentagon soon.
Yeah, additionally, the White House has announced that if Lloyd Austin does submit his resignation, it will not be accepted. Now, a couple of things here. By the way, if you're just getting caught up to speed, the reason why I realized I didn't disclose this part of the story. It's the most important part. He checked himself into the hospital and ended up in intensive care and was incapacitated, and nobody knew. He didn't respect the chain of command. He didn't tell the National Security Advisor, Mr. Sullivan. He didn't tell the Commander-in-Chief, Joe Biden. Nobody knew. It was a mystery. He was checked out. He was literally incapacitated, and he's the Secretary of Defense while men and women in the military are in harm's way. In fact, while he was incapacitated, men and women in the military were fired upon by enemy aircraft, unmanned aircraft in the Mediterranean. And we fired back and disabled and shot down aircraft. We were actually engaged in warfare while the Secretary of Defense, a key critical part of the chain of command of the military, was completely out of it. And when the Pentagon was challenged on this, when the story finally emerged, they said, oh, well, the Deputy Secretary of Defense was in charge of everything. It turns out the Deputy Secretary of Defense was on vacation in Puerto Rico. But the Pentagon said, well, it's okay because she had communications equipment. Communications equipment. You know what that means? Hey, text me if anything happens, okay? The grown-ups are in charge, guys. We're back to the norms. And of course, Biden stands by him. But one thing that was said here, that he is proud of Secretary of Defense Austin for stepping up and taking ownership over the lack of transparency. Okay, number one, first of all, thanks for acknowledging that there was a lack of transparency, but he didn't step up and take ownership of it. Have you heard anything that he has to say? Have you read a quote from him? Has he said anything? No, he's still recovering from his Brazilian butt lift or the gender reassignment surgery. It's one of those two. It's got to be. And this is the best part. When reporters pressed and said, tell us what the surgical procedure was, Austin's people said, no, he wants everyone to respect his privacy when it comes to medical procedures. Now, I think most Americans can understand that. I mean, I don't want people prying into my medical history and my medical procedures. And certainly if the Secretary of Defense wants to maintain his medical privacy, I guess that's his right. Except here's the problem with that. Under his leadership at the Pentagon, every single member of the United States military, the people he's responsible for and takes command of, every single person in the military, from the Army and the Navy and the Marines and the Air Force and the Coast Guard, they don't have that privilege. They're not allowed to have any medical privacy. In fact, Lloyd Austin demanded to have the vaccine history of every single member of the military, and he discharged thousands of people in the armed forces if they refused to get that COVID shot. He told them all that they had to get the shot because it was the only way to protect the military from catching and spreading the COVID-19 virus. But of course, we know now that that was, shall we say, inaccurate. Because Lloyd Austin, who has been vaccinated and boosted several times, he caught COVID. So to pretty much everybody that I know in the public world who has been multiple boosted, including the Commander-in-Chief. We know now, again, medically, scientifically, it's been acknowledged by the CDC that the COVID shot does not, in fact, keep you from getting the virus or spreading the virus. But this man, Lloyd Austin, who now demands his medical privacy so that he can go AWOL without telling anyone. He demands his medical privacy, but he demanded the people in the military leave and get discharged if they didn't get the shot that he lied to them about. That's pretty rich. And that's exactly the perfect example of the Biden administration's lack of leadership. Jake Sullivan, the national security advisor, acknowledged that he was completely unaware of the fact that his own Secretary of Defense, the man who runs his Pentagon, was incapacitated and in intensive care.
With regard to Secretary Austin, I wasn't aware of his medical issue. In fact, I talked to Lloyd last weekend for this incident, and I know that he's put out a statement addressing it. What I can say is this. It has been, it remains one of the great privileges of my career over 30 years now, working in government, to serve alongside Lloyd Austin.
Oh, blah, blah, blah. What a ridiculous statement. Nobody cares that it's been a pleasure and an honor for you to serve with Lloyd Austin. And by the way, no one believes that. That's not the point. Did you hear what he said at the beginning of that statement? I actually just spoke with him last weekend. So he spoke with him while he was hospitalized, and he didn't tell him. He kept it a secret. And he's not outraged. He's not. What does this guy have on Jake Sullivan and Joe Biden?
Tony Blinken.
Oh, is that Tony Blinken? Oh, thank you. Is that our Secretary of State? Okay, so he didn't know about it either. You know, they are kind of all the same, aren't they? These pasty-skinned Ivy League national security. Okay, so not only did the National Security Advisor not know about it, but neither did the Secretary of State. All right. Well, listen, when they're not lying, they're lying. Mark Thiessen worked in the Office of Secretary of Defense when it was Secretary Rumsfeld during the Bush administration. He put on X, when I worked for SecDef and DepSecDef could not travel at the same time so that one was always in the Pentagon and there was no risk of the chain of command being interrupted. The idea that the SecDef would be incapacitated and not inform his deputy or the commander-in-chief is unthinkable. But of course, Mark Thiessen was part of a serious administration during a serious time of military engagement, the global war on terror. These people don't even understand any of what we went through back then, and they're playing with our military right now like it's an experiment. Mark Thiessen went on to say, another question, how is it that with hundreds of attacks on U.S. forces in Iraq, Syria, and the Red Sea, and wars raging in Europe and the Middle East, that the president and his top advisors went 3 days without speaking to the Secretary of Defense? This is embarrassing, as embarrassing for the White House as it is SecDef. That's a great point, too. This whole thing, what they never told me. When you've got that kind of military engagement around the world and the hotspots that we've got right now, and we keep hearing, one of Joe Biden's reasons for running for re-election is that he wants to resolve all of the conflicts around the world. Now, let's not mention the fact that there were no conflicts around the world when he took office. So he's responsible for all these conflicts popping up. But he acts as though he's a wartime president and he's the only one that can solve these problems. And meanwhile, he actually doesn't talk with his Secretary of Defense for 3 straight days. How serious can these military conflicts be if he's not even talking to his Secretary of Defense? How serious can these military conflicts be if the Secretary of Defense thinks it's fine to go have his voluntary procedure? Gender reassignment. Right? It's got to be gender reassignment. It's the only way to ensure that he doesn't get fired. That's it. That's why nobody wants to criticize him. That's why they won't accept his resignation, even if it delivers it. He's coming out. He's now going to be Lola Austin. And whatever Lola wants, Lola gets. I think we've broken enough rules today. That's it. We'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place. My name is Larry O'Connor. You can call me Larry. And one other thing. Oh, yeah. Go Blue.